Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us today for the online film premiere of I Have to Speak, Colombia and Uganda, and the following discussion. Today's event is available in many languages, in English, Spanish, Burmese, Kurdish, and Thai. And to listen in your preferred language, please click on the interpretation button below on your screen, the one with the globe, and then select the language that you want to listen to. Thank you in advance also to all our interpreters today. I'll give you a second to find your right channel. My name is Evelyn Pauls. I'm the researcher and project manager of this project at the Conflict Transformation Research Department at the Berko Foundation. This film that we're going to see today is the product of over 1 year of collaborative work between our partners at Makipura in Colombia, at FOWAC in Uganda, and me at the Berko Foundation. I Have to Speak, Colombia and Uganda, the title of our documentary, is a participatory documentary developed, filmed, and written by former female combatants from both countries. The film features their experiences during the conflict, the peace and reintegration process, and the continuous challenges they face in rebuilding their lives in their own words. Let me just stop sharing the slide. I won't say too much in advance because the film speaks for itself, but just to say that hearing from the women who have lived through the conflict directly can teach us as an international audience important lessons for current peace processes and reintegration efforts. The film can also be a way for women and men who are currently members of armed movements, maybe preparing for peace talks or implementing peace agreements, to hear from others who have experienced similar things, whom they would never be able to meet face to face. These are some of the issues that we will discuss with our panel after the screening, and I will introduce our speakers then. But before we screen this movie for the first time, I'm very pleased that we will hear a few words of welcome from Inken Denker, who's the head of Division 412 for Gender Equality at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. We are very grateful that this project is supported by the BMZ, and I want to thank them and all our colleagues at GIZ for their continuous support. Over to you, Inken.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Dear speakers, guests, and esteemed members of civil society and academia from Colombia and Uganda and all over the world, thank you all for joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome you to this film premiere, From Female Combatants to Filmmakers, from our partner, the Berko Foundation, as Evelyn has just introduced. She also said, my name is Inken Denker. I'm heading the Gender Equality Division at BMZ. We all know that an inclusive design of peace processes with the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls in all their diversity, and civil society as well, strengthens sustainable peace. And it also provides space for the potential in societies that are urgently needed for transformation. The reality, however, looks different, and we also know that. Women are systematically marginalized in peace processes. Between 1992 and 2019, women made up an average of 13% of negotiators and only 6% of signatories in high-level peace processes. That is why, with BMZ's feminist development policy, the BMZ is committed to strengthening inclusive peace processes and, in particular, the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all their diversity, in all phases in the conflict cycle. Peace processes must take up the voices and also the concerns of people who are particularly affected by conflict. When we think of non-state armed groups in conflict, we mainly associate them with male combatants. However, around 30 to 40% of these members are women, and you probably know that better than me. Our cooperation with Berko is a great example of how to explore the role of female combatants in post-conflict societies in order to create conditions for inclusive and sustainable peace. In the past year, the project has captured the various and unique challenges and opportunities faced by female members of non-state armed groups, from Uganda and Colombia. For this movie that we're going to see in a minute, the very intimate or personal method of self-directed filmmaking was used. Thereby, the project directly contributes to the implementation of our feminist development policy, the German National Action Plan for the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, as well as to our knowledge of inclusive peace processes. We believe that much more can be done to advance inclusive and sustainable peace in light of our feminist development cooperation. We're thrilled to learn from the perspectives and experiences from female ex-combatants in Colombia and Uganda today. So lastly, I'd like to thank our colleagues from Berko Foundation for their work on this important project. And of course, a special thanks goes to all the participating female ex-combatants for their trust in sharing their stories with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Inken, for putting this into context. So now, without much further ado, I'll hand over to my Berko colleagues at the comms team to screen the movie. So sit back and enjoy, and I'll get back to you after. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the film. I will now go ahead and introduce our distinguished panel, and then I will ask a round of questions to our panelists before we open it up to you in the audience for questions and answers. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window to ask your questions. And you can ask them in any of our 5 languages that the event is taking place in today. And I will then select some and give them to our panel. We will try to finish around 15 minutes past the hour, so that leaves us around 45 minutes for this discussion. So let me first introduce our speakers, and I will ask them to turn on their cameras also. So first, I would like to introduce Grace Arak. Grace is the founder and executive director of the Foundation for Women Affected by Conflicts, short for WAC, in Uganda. And she is the head of our Ugandan partner organization on this project. Hi, Grace. Second, I would like to welcome Violeta, who I know just recently connected, so I'm very glad she has good internet now. So Violeta Guetnamova is one of the filmmakers, on this project, and I'm so glad she can join us today. She is a signatory of the 2016 Colombian peace agreement and has supported the reintegration process ever since. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Glaucia Boya. Hi, Glaucia. Great to have you join us. Glaucia serves as the UNDP Global Advisor on Reintegration, including DDR and PRR, which stands for Prosecution, Rehabilitation, Reintegration, with over 20 years of experience in the UN system. So thank you all for joining us. My first question will be for Grace. And there are 2 parts to my question. So first, you have worked with female returnees in northern Uganda since the end of the civil war. How did the participatory nature of this project influence the work compared to other projects you've worked on? And then the second part of my question, what are the main challenges faced by female returnees in northern Uganda today? And what would be your main recommendations on their long-term reintegration and support? Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Evelyn. Thank you, representative from BMZ. Thank you, our partner from Colombia, for all that. Thank you, everyone who has joined this very important event to listen, learn, understand, and replan. Straight to your question, Evelyn. Yes, for what has worked with former war victims or of LRA war, and then also worked with those who were affected by war and they were not abducted. So we have these categories of those who were in abduction, and those who were not abducted. But if you analyze their problem or what they went through, are almost the same. What has FOWAC done from the time it was founded? FOWAC was founded towards the end of the war in northern Uganda in 2007. And then in 2008, we legalized it to be a national NGO that still with the main focus of supporting war victims reintegrating the communities. And from that time, we were only doing work of counseling, group counseling that provides the platform for women to share, learn, get information, get emotional support, cry when they want, and then, you know, wipe their tears together. So after the end of the war, and we concluded with mainly the psychosocial support, we realized that it was important that we integrate economic empowerment, because transitional justice for women requires an holistic approach. We couldn't see just to deal in one area of providing psychosocial support. So later on, we entered into economic empowerment, where we also integrated advocacy that supports reintegration of these returnees so that they are not stigmatized, so that they are not killed in the community, so that the children they return with be accepted in the community as well. Talk to the family, mediate dialogue, and also enter into traditional cleansing ceremony, which is symbolic for acceptance in society. And all this was to get the comfort the women needed to. And then the economic empowerment, we got into teaching them on how to carry out business, how to have the culture of savings, how to, you know, learn how to do business in such a way that they are able even to pay their children to school, meet other basic needs at home. So these were the key thematic areas that FOWAC mainly engaged in, and till now, FOWAC is still continuing. Not only that, FOWAC also saw that it was important that confidence is built in the women, because there was no way that we could say these women would have their voice, you know, spoken. We needed to hear from them, like what is happening now. They have spoken from their own mouth. We've heard from them directly. So it's only through creating self-esteem that they are able to talk about their issue. And this comes through their peers, their fellow women, and then managing how to solve problems. They are able to solve their own problem by themselves, but after us empowering them. Other thing that we did also, we encouraged the women who were lucky enough to be under our program by, you know, being able to now get the opportunity, tap the opportunity from the government programs. This becomes very difficult if they don't know how to maneuver and find how some of the very important programs, which they call a transitional programs, they couldn't benefit from it if we had not at least given them that way. And then also we provided insurance, a very small scale insurance that was mainly for those who were under our programs. There were overwhelming number who needed the same support, but we were having, you know, numbers that were only for the resources we have. And we are providing them insurance, medical insurance to go to medical center, hospital, referral hospital, and get treatment. And then one very important thing is supporting, empowering women to venture into leadership opportunities. This is something that I saw very important, and it worked a lot. Most of the women who underwent through our program were able to enter into leadership, you know, venture where they were getting into politics. In their community, they were taking lead in some of the work they do. Among those women, I deliberately said that we only put one woman who benefited our program, but we should, those other two who were interviewed, three who were interviewed were they did not benefit from our program. So you can see the one who benefited our program and how she is and how she talks and how she has, coped with life. But if you see those ones who did not go through the program we've been promoting women into, you could see that there is a challenge. And then you ask about the challenges that we are faced with. We are talking about unclear number. If we are talking about these returnees, how many are they? What is the magnitude of their problem? What is the gravity of their issues? So one very important thing challenge that we see is that we don't have validated data about this category. Each organization has its own data, another one has its own data, and these need to come together so that we establish how many are we working for, and that planning becomes easy. And then secondly, the issue of trauma is still a big problem. And then why is this trauma still a big problem? There are triggers. You've heard what the women are saying. There are triggers in the community. A lot has been done in their lives, of course, to integrate. But then there are a lot of problems that are still existing. Economic issues, stigma, seeing how the children they return with from captivity are wasted, are not going to school. So these are problems. And then another one is issues of livelihood. For work could not stretch its hand to support all. We had to support limited number. And that still make it very difficult for those others to benefit. And then also the government programs that should benefit them sometimes may not, sometimes touches them. But then if I am stigmatized when I go in abroad, how do I tomorrow again go? So they feel isolated still and they don't love to join. And then illiteracy. When you hear, I've been hearing several times, Madam Grace, can you look for us educational opportunity for our children? I didn't get the chance to go to school because I was abducted. Now I want my child to be educated like any other child I see in my community. How can I get this opportunity? They love to see their children go to school, but it is a problem that they have to attain the UPE education, which in one teacher for 500, children, and then getting into secondary, the mother has to pay, and that they cannot afford. So these are issues that are a big problem. And then lack of safe space. What women are now telling us in this documentary are typical issues that we could capture and use it to support others, make others learn, and for educational purpose, and for peace building process or program as it has been said. But in the entire northern region and actually sub-region that has been greatly affected by this war, you can't find a place where a woman can step in to get counseling, to get information, to feel safe, to learn, and to develop. So these are things that we need as an organization, as international programs that wants to change women. We need a space. There are no space for women to come together and have a share. And then lastly, a sense of belonging. Why do I talk about sense of belonging? In the culture that I've worked with, I am from, and the work that I've done with this community, a boy child, if you are not born of that clan, no one would love to take the responsibility of taking care of you. Because if you enter into conflict with the law, the clan becomes responsible. And many clans, and almost all, do not want to enter into that. And that's why these children, if you are a girl child, you are a little better because they know that you will go to another clan. But if you are a boy child, either you become a thief, either you commit suicide, or you look for where to whatever you can do with your life. So these are challenges that I see is very crucial, especially with the returnees.
Thank you, Grace. And I think from those, I think pretty clear recommendations are also coming. And I want to turn now first to our other speakers, and then we can come back to this. Thank you so much for sharing. So secondly, I want to turn to Violeta. And my question to you are similar to what I just asked Grace. So as the filmmaker of the Colombian part of the project, how was this project different to other work you have experienced with female ex-combatants in Colombia? And then the second part of my question, from your perspective and the women you interviewed, what are the main challenges for the women of FARC today? And what are the main lessons learned from the 2016 process for the reintegration of them? And what would you recommend for a future process, for example, for the women from ELN that's ongoing now? Violeta, over to you. You are still on mute. Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Buenos días para todos, para todas las participantes de este espacio. Un saludo para los panelistas, las panelistas, y un especial saludo para las compañeras de Uganda. Bueno, los retos, bueno, voy a empezar como por las diferencias, lo que me enseñó este proyecto.
And what I have learned from this project. This was the first time I made a process around what is listening the FARC women. I have done things related to education, communication, but I have never centered on women from FARC. So the freedom of expressing through the communication tools such as short film, voices, and feel former combatants' voices so they could express themselves in a free manner. And what I see is that many times when we see this kind of work, and normally journalists are the ones who talk to these women, and they come from a specific media or specific sectors, and doesn't give enough freedom for women to speak, so they cannot express themselves and express freely about what they feel, because it is apart from the kind of picture we have, and it is that FARC women are victims from FARC, and it's not in the way they express themselves. They are victims from state, and currently they are victims also from state structures. So this project allowed us to show FARC women from a different perspective, from an angle where they could vindicate as a political subject, as a subject of rights, as a person that assumed in equal conditions with men a status of combatant in their past. And now they are in a transition of reincorporation. In that sense, our challenges, current challenges, all of them, there are so many challenges, starting with implementation of the peace agreement, which is the core aspect for us. Along our fight, more than 200 years, we have fought around land acquisition. So implementing the real peace agreement could open our doors to democratization of the country. Now we have a progressive government, and our expectation is that opens our path so we can make a transition from the paper to reality. So men, women, children could be benefit as signers of a peace agreement. We start from the aspect that any reincorporation process had not been done without communities. So that's our first challenge. So to fulfill in a comprehensive way our peace agreement, including this gender approach that was so important for the final agreement. And at the same time, we have other kind of challenges. They are equally important. And it is to face stigmatization against signers and social leaders, because some people talk about post-conflict or post-agreement. Now, after the peace agreement signature, when we started to realize our project, approximately 350 former combatants, men and women, were assassinated. So now, here that we are talking, more than 400, around 400 former combatants have been assassinated, also social leaders. All this since the peace agreement has been signed. So now we are saying we're in a transition for peace, but we are actually facing a political and armed conflict. It implies that women from FARC and former combatants do not have access to fundamental rights. They are facing the reality that millions from Colombian people live in poverty, in rural areas, but also in the cities. And stigmatization is added to this difficult situation because they were part of a guerrilla group. So this kind of stigmatization is the one they faced. And this is generated also a lot by media that along 5 decades have been saying things against combatants. So they have tried a lot from the institution, so women forget why they joined to an armed group. But in reality, former combatants are not ashamed for being part of the FARC. They don't want to forget their past because it's the one that shaped them. So this transition that wasn't clear at all. So when they signed the agreement, the family we were got disintegrated. We split out in different small parts. So we got spread, and everything that connected us, the camaradeness, has been disappearing. So we are vulnerable. There were many reasons why women joined to FARC. Lack of guarantees, political violence, even familiar violence, gender violence. So for many women, it has been shocking to go out from their family. They escaped from a violent family or a violent structure, a lack of education, resources. They were mistreated. And sexual violence also happened within their families. So they joined to the FARC as an alternative way. So they could study, they could prepare themselves. So they gain confidence in themselves as transformation subjects, agents, so playing a role in the organization. But now coming back and finding again all this difficult reality. So many of the women we interviewed told us psychosocial problems have been generated specifically after the agreement, not during war. So when you joined to FARC, you were aware of what you were doing. You knew what you were doing. And you know you were in an insurgent and a legal group. So it was a decision. So you start to build your personality as a revolutionary woman. But now, a part of the society understands this, but there is a myth, and it is that the FARC were terrorists. But this space, this project allowed us to say, no, I'm not a victim of FARC. I wasn't forced to be part of it. They joined to the group because circumstances obliged them to make this decision, men and women. So it challenges all of them because anything of the agreement have been fulfilled. And violence, political violence, social violence, economic violence hasn't stopped yet. So many women after insurgency, we were expecting to have access to rural education, for example, some specific issues that would allow us to move forward. But now in reality, things seem to be very different. We don't have the opportunity to get educated. So all these doors that should be open now are closed. So they got mothers, they have 1 or 2 children, that also make them difficult to exert a political leadership. So social equality in Colombia is a problem that affects all the society, but in the specific case of women, they got affected by stigmatization against them and their children, and also to not have the opportunity to exert their political rights and political leaderships. For all our comrades that were negotiating for this ELN women that are now negotiating, from my own experience, what I think is the most important thing is not let that this comrade relationship we have get lost after the peace signature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Violeta, for this rich account and the challenges and recommendations. Finally, I want to turn to Glaucia, and having seen the documentary and listened to our previous speakers, some of what they shared is obviously very different in their experience, but some of the issues raised are also similar along economic opportunity, stigmatization, education, etc. Are these challenges for the long-term reintegration of female combatants shared across other contexts that you've worked in? I know there are many. Or are there other prominent issues today that we should pay attention to? And then secondly, what, in your opinion, should be the role of the UN and other international actors in addressing these challenges, especially on long-term reintegration? And are there some best practices based on your experience that you can share with us today?
Well, thank you very much, Evelyn. These are very big questions. It's very challenging to address and make justice to these questions in the few time that I have.
No sé, estaba...
But let me thank you for the invitation. This is a great initiative. I appreciated very much watching the film. Was very touched by the stories that I have heard, and I see very much the contribution that the film is making and can make. It's also a great honor for me to be able to interact with all of you, with Grace and Violeta, with the women filmmakers, and the women who have shared the stories with all of us. It's very important that we hear this, the voices of these women, and that we amplify their voices through a film. And this initiative is doing exactly that. So first, I would say each individual's experience and pathways is very, very unique. Each context is very different. They bring their own specificities. And we have seen in the film itself how Uganda, actually, the Uganda context differs so much from the Colombia context. But indeed, there are reintegration challenges that are derived from these experiences, and we can see these across several different contexts. And it's important that we have a chance to analyze all of this. First of all, we have seen in Uganda, particularly the stories that we have heard, how the fact that these women were abducted as children. In the case, they were girls abducted by LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army. We have seen the use of girls in the armed group as supporters. Roles are very, very clear. They were used as cooks, as porters, as sex slaves. They have become bushwives, child mothers. So we have seen extremely high levels of victimization and stigmatization. Comparing to Colombia, here we have a portrait of the female ex-combatants, this deep sense of belonging to an armed group, sharing the ideals of the group, living as female combatants in a military community where they were equal to their male combatants, sharing the responsibilities and roles. And how they have benefited from more gender equality and appreciation during their times with the group than in our current society. So this is very, very clear. It comes across very clearly through the stories and in the film. Certainly, I would say if we start to drawing parallels with other countries, in terms of Uganda, these patterns of abduction, exploitation, victimization, they are seen in across Africa's armed groups and I would say also in many other contexts around the world. But from my experience, I have seen this when I had the opportunity to support my colleagues in working in Burundi, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I think we know this traces back to also experiences we have heard from women members of armed groups in Liberia, Sierra Leone, if we go back in time. I think in today's conflict, similar patterns are observed in Nigeria, particularly in across the Lake Chad Basin region, in the conflict affected areas where Boko Haram has operated. So immediately, I think we have seen, and from my experience traveling and supporting our colleagues in Nigeria, how this has emerged in the form of this what is called the bad blood. Referring to the children that were born while their mothers were with Boko Haram. So there are tremendous challenges involved in acceptance of these women and their children when they finally managed to escape Boko Haram, very similar in many ways to the stories that we have heard in the film. Of course, now this has changed over time, and this was thanks to the work of governments, the United Nations, international governmental organizations, external actors, and also the local organizations. But the real work and challenges we know have been addressed by national actors themselves and by the communities themselves. So this is very important. When you come to Colombia, we certainly see also similar patterns of gender equality and empowerment of women in arms in Nepal. And also, I think we have heard, many of us, about the female fighters of Kurdistan. All these groups have had high numbers of female combatants, and it's very common to see this disillusion upon returning to civilian life when they have the opportunity to do so. So they have basically no choice going back to civilian life, but to fit again in these traditional gender roles and in the challenges that they face when finally they also are able to become mothers for some of them with experiences that are very similar to Colombia, where we have seen this baby boom soon after the peace agreement was signed, and the women and men were able to lay down their weapons and gather in what we call these camps. Yeah, we see all of this. I would even go as far as tracing this back to in today's conflict and think about Ukraine, because the young women who are also joining the military forces to defend their countries. And I think we know very clearly that even today, we cannot talk about any disarmament, demobilization in the conflict in Ukraine, but we know that many are already challenged in their reintegration. We know we are already, as UNGP, working to support the Ministry of Veterans in that country, because in this moment, as the war goes on, many are injured, many acquire disabilities, and need already support for their reintegration. So in some, these reintegration challenges are immense. They are related to acceptance by community members, particularly where there are very high levels of victimization. They are related to this exactly not falling back to traditional gender roles, achieving financial independence, overcoming deep trauma, being treated as equal, being able to reintegrate politically also, make decisions, participate in political processes, being elected, being confronted with the poverty and unfair distribution of wealth. All of this is very, very key. Now, finally, turning to the role that the UN has played in these processes, I think we have consolidated practices in what we call disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And it is important to note here that the term is actually, this term, DDR, is not used at all in Uganda, and it's not used at all in Colombia. In Uganda, we know that the process that was created was referred to as the amnesty process, whereby whoever was leaving the Lord's Resistance Army or other armed groups went through an amnesty as reporters. There was never any reference to demobilized combatants. And in Colombia, we're not talking about DDR at all. We are talking about laying down weapons and about reincorporation. We don't even use the word reintegration in Colombia. But it is very important that we accept all of this, even though we do want, as international actors, to understand the challenges and consolidate guidance so we don't make the same mistakes in other processes. But I would say that most prominently today, in the evolution of this, how we support reintegration, is the focus on community-based reintegration approaches. This is what we need to support. It's about the women themselves, particularly when they face high levels of victimization by armed groups, by authorities even, or when they are victimized by communities. So it's so important that we work through communities and we support the communities themselves to come up with the solutions, to be able to absorb and create the services that are required for these people to return and reintegrate and be accepted. Finally, there's so much more that I could be sharing with you. This is so exciting, in fact. I mean, on the one note, we are deeply affected, emotionally affected by the stories. On the other hand, we see that there is so much hope. And this is what I also appreciated very much in the film, how it ends on this very positive note and showing the courage, the strength, the determination, and showing that it is possible actually to achieve these transitions from military to civilian life to return home. So it does bring this very powerful message of hope, messages to other women, including who have lived similar experiences, that reintegration is possible. So, but it does require a certain support, but we, as international community and as external actors, have to be particularly aware of how much of that external support is required, in what form, and how, in order not to disrupt these processes that happen in any case at the individual level and at the community level, at the family level. So let me stop here. But very, very pleased to have been honored to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for trying to fit so much information in your very short answer. There are a lot of questions in the chat, and I will take the liberty to take the extra 15 minutes, even though I said we might finish at 1:15. We do have another 15 minutes to ask some of these questions. And I will just select some from the chat and ask them to all the panelists, and then go to each of you for a brief comment. You can answer a question, or you can just say any final remarks that you would like, and then we'll close the webinar after. So I will ask you 3 questions from the chat, and as I said, you can select any one of them to answer. So the first question was around how would you suggest we can address the problem of stigmatization in post-conflict societies? The second question is, how did the role and dynamics, the gender roles and dynamics during the war influence gender identities after the agreement, and how can that be analyzed? And then finally, there's a question around how we can bring these stories to active combatants who are currently going through similar experiences, or those who might be susceptible to experience them again in these or other contexts. Are there any strategies that you have come across in your work that might work to sort of share these stories with people who are currently going through these processes? So I will go in the order that you've spoken. So I will first hand it over to Grace, then to Violeta, and then to Glaucia to answer any of these questions and say any final comments. Thank you. Over to you, Grace. You are still on mute.
Yes.
Now.
Yeah, how can we deal with issues of stigma? You know, these are things that are not, stigmatization in its form cannot be clearly, you know, spotted. But given the way people would look at you, people would react to you, people would behave to you, you get to know that I am getting stigmatized, somebody is not accepting me in this society or in this community. But above all, the most important thing that I feel still work very much is empowering these women to speak about encounter of such. And when they speak about it individually, we can face those families. Facing those families can be done at an individual level. Because if we are to ask about it, talk about it, everyone was affected, whether you were abducted or not. So the trauma is still on everyone. And the idea of do no harm is still important by not isolating those who stigmatize, thinking that they are the wrong ones, because they are also undergoing mental issues. And then also Uganda, at a national level, for example, in Uganda, Uganda has enacted, agreed to take, to implement some of the policies on transitional justice. And among those issues of dealing with issues of stigma, how can the country deal with issues of stigma? And when we talk about stigma, it is so broad. There needs an holistic approach of addressing it: economic empowerment, community engagement, advocacy, so many, counseling, because sometimes even if somebody is not really after stigmatizing you, you think it is. And then also somebody said, how can we in future stop this kind of experience women have gone through? I still say, let's empower women to speak. And then secondly, let's encourage women to join peacekeeping, not by force, but voluntary. Let's encourage feminist leadership. The equality and equity that women are fighting for can only be realized if we continue promoting women, empowering women to learn a feminist leadership way. Because if I am a police, if I am a soldier, and a fellow woman is undergoing all this experience that the women have been sharing, I would not see it happen. I would speak with authority because I am in the military. If I'm in a leadership, I know that this is wrong. I will speak with authority as a leader. So let's encourage, empower women to speak with their power and then get into peacekeeping, not by force, but voluntary.
Thank you, Grace, for this powerful statement. Violeta, would you like to take one of the questions? You are still on mute. Now.
¿Cómo influyó el rol y las dinámicas?
How the role during war influenced gender identities after the agreement? Well, when all these issues related to violence with the assassination of Jorge Eliezer Gaitán, after this starting point of violence as an alternative to this political violence among parties in the country, emerged the FARC-EP. So few women joined at the beginning. Roles were very defined because there were peasants that arrived with their sons and daughters fleeing from the violence in their territories. But with the pass of the year, many women joined to the FARC, and having weapons, being combatants, and be part of the party cells inside the group were political conquerors of guerrilleras, up to the point that women started to play the same role as men in the regulations. For example, men and women equally went to combat, to struggle. Men and women were in charge of cooking and clean. So this allowed them to be a political cadre. So critical thinking, analyzing political reality, education inside FARC, and be part of the mass organization also. Women also had the opportunity to decide they wanted to be, if they wanted to be doctors or nurses, if they wanted to study one thing or another. For all of them were the same possibilities to get specialized in one of the specific labors that were needed within war. In that sense, out of this reality, where women were so important, they were they played a key role within the organization. We all have a role. We all played a role. And it depended a lot on yourself. And apart from the unity, from the front, from the specific group you were in, we were in charge of the life of our comrades. As Victoria was explaining in the video, we all were responsible for others' life and well-being of others. In that sense, coming out to a society, I'm not saying that in the FARC we're not machismo or chauvinist, because Colombia is a result of machismo and chauvinism, but the chauvinism we experienced within the FARC was fight was struggled by women. We didn't experience assassination against women, for example, or sexual violence was pretty much condemned, and people were killed because of committing sexual violence. So our principles were very clear. It was a need, and we ruled this. All these gender issues were ruled inside. And now here outside in the society, they say us we're free. And we didn't want to play a role of mothers. And it's the role many are playing now. So what we see is that everything is different because you are always divided. You are always fighting for finding something to eat, the lack of access to work, to health, to education. All this lead us to women as leaders, and these women that had the idea of building criticism to, and what we were building as a part of a guerrilla movement, now we find a very different reality. So FARC women need to go back to their roots and to understand again and remember and recall why were they fighting, for example, because these daily life roles are leading us to normalize much patriarchal practices we don't want to go back to.
Yeah.
And we were not obliged to this while we were in the FARC. So now we have other challenges because many of them are now housekeeping and are subjugated to their husbands. So men are working and women are in charge of housekeeping. And that's wouldn't happen in the FARC. So now we want to change this because it is not in the way. We have to recover these important issues of our past because our past define our future. In the sense, we have to recover some important things we have gained before so we can continue fighting in the legal aspect.
Thank you so much, Violeta. It's very powerful. Okay, Glacia, you have the final words in a couple of minutes to either answer a question really briefly or say any final remarks you might have.
Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, we could be discussing all these questions for long, but let me pick up this this question about the how to share these stories with active combatants who are already undergoing this very similar experiences. So this brings us to the whole issue of dissemination and strategic communication and the impact that these stories could make if they were shared with the different audiences. I think with active combatants, as the question poses, we would, I think, still need to reflect the terms of how to reach these active combatants. And here it doesn't say just women; it is also about male. It could be also the male combatants, the commanders themselves. So there is a great potential here in terms of awareness raising, in terms of changing also practices that exist in armed groups as they are operating. So this is perhaps something to think about. I mean, today we know the reach of social media and how it's possible to penetrate. And we know also the armed groups use social media also to recruit and so on. It's being used by all sides, but perhaps we are not using it as strategically as the armed groups themselves are using. And perhaps this is an opportunity that we have here around these types of films, stories also. The other point is to go beyond the active combatants and armed groups in terms of relating and giving the sense of hope to the women, former combatants who are going through these transition processes. From my experience, having visited some of this and talked to these women, we feel that they are very isolated. They are not aware, in fact, when I went to Indonesia, Aceh, and was speaking to a group of women, that actually in Colombia, they have comrades that have gone through the very similar experiences. And when I recall very well when I was just sharing those experiences with them, how interested they have become in even talking to me, in even opening up. So I think there's a great power in terms of sharing this. I see the time is running up. I have so much more to say, but let me stop here. Yeah, just to say there's much more. It could be also within programs to raise awareness of how we work with our own staff, within government. There's so many uses of this documentary for impact, for strategic impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Klausia, and I'll definitely be in touch to explore some of those opportunities. So we're almost at time, so thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your experiences and reflections. The documentary is now live on YouTube, where you can reshare it and rewatch it. Thank you to Annette for sharing that link. Thank you also to everyone who made this event possible, especially our translators, and also to our video editor, Juan from Demolition Films. I want to thank also Isabel Kafka from Makipura, Beatrice Achiro from FOAC, Beatrice Austin, Veronique Dudue, Claudia Cruz Almeida, and the comms team from Berghof, and of course our partners at the BMZ and GIZ. That's it from us today. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed our event. See you next time.